That night, as Eleanor lay in bed, sleep eluded her once more. The storm that had raged outside had given way to an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of leaves in the wind. She tossed and turned restlessly, her thoughts consumed by Count Alucard and the secrets he kept hidden. Unable to bear the silence any longer, Eleanor slipped out of bed and made her way towards the guest cottage. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the path ahead. When she reached the cottage, she found the door slightly ajar once more, a faint light flickering within. Heart pounding in her chest, Eleanor pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cottage was dimly lit by a single candle, its flame casting dancing shadows across the walls. Count Alucard stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the moonlit garden outside. "Count Alucard," Eleanor called softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "Eleanor," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and concern. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor crossed the room to stand before him, her heart in turmoil. "I had to see you," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't sleep." Count Alucard studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching hers. "Eleanor, you shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "It's dangerous." Eleanor shook her head, her resolve firm. "I had to know the truth, Count Alucard. About you, about everything." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "There are things I cannot explain," he murmured. "Things that would only frighten you." Eleanor reached out to him, her hand trembling as she touched his arm. "Tell me," she pleaded. "Tell me what's been happening. I want to understand." Count Alucard met her gaze, his expression haunted. "You trust me, Eleanor?" Eleanor nodded without hesitation. "With all my heart." Count Alucard's shoulders sagged with resignation. "Very well," he said finally, his voice low and filled with pain. "But you must be prepared for what you will learn." And as the candle flame flickered in the stillness of the night, Count Alucard began to unravel the mysteries that surrounded him. Mysteries that would lead Eleanor down a path fraught with danger, betrayal, and the startling revelation of her own true destiny. As Count Alucard began to reveal the hidden truths that surrounded him, Eleanor's world shifted on its axis. She listened intently, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and fascination. As he spoke of ancient pacts and bloodlines that traced back through centuries of history. His voice was low and measured, each word laden with the weight of ages past. "Eleanor," Count Alucard began, his gaze fixed on hers with a solemn intensity. "I am not as I appear." Eleanor swallowed hard, her mind struggling to comprehend the revelations unfolding before her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Count Alucard paced the small room, his movements fluid and graceful. "I am not human," he admitted reluctantly, as if the admission pained him. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "Not human," she echoed, her mind reeling with disbelief. "But you look." Count Alucard turned to face her, his features etched with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Appearances can be deceiving," he said quietly. "I am what is known as a dhampir, a being born of both human and vampire blood." Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. She had heard tales of such creatures, half human, half vampire beings with powers and vulnerabilities unique to their lineage. But to come face to face with one was beyond anything she had imagined. Why are you telling me this now?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Count Alucard's expression softened, a hint of warmth in his eyes as he regarded her. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he replied earnestly. "And because I care for you deeply, Eleanor." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat at his words, her emotions in turmoil. She had felt a connection with Count Alucard from the moment they had met, but to learn that he was not entirely human added a layer of complexity to their burgeoning relationship. "You said there are dark forces at work here," Eleanor ventured cautiously, her thoughts racing. "Are they connected to what you are?" Count Alucard nodded solemnly. "Yes," he admitted, "there are those who seek to use my heritage for their own gain. They believe that by harnessing the power of a Dhampir, they can unlock ancient secrets and wield unimaginable power." Eleanor's mind raced with questions, her curiosity overshadowing her fear. "And what about you?" she asked quietly. "What do you want?" Count Alucard's gaze softened, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "All I want, Eleanor," he said softly, "is to protect you. To keep you safe from the dangers that surround us." Eleanor reached out to him, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm. "I believe you," she whispered, her voice filled with conviction. "I trust you." Count Alucard's expression softened further, a flicker of gratitude crossing his features. "Thank you, Eleanor," he murmured, his voice barely above a breath. "You have no idea what that means to me." And in that moment, as moonlight filtered through the window and shadows danced across the room, Eleanor and Count Alucard stood united in their resolve to confront the darkness that threatened to tear them apart. Their bond, forged in the crucible of secrets and revelations, grew stronger with each passing moment. But unbeknownst to them, forces beyond their control were already moving into motion. In the depths of the night, whispers echoed through the halls of the Sinclair plantation, whispers of betrayal, of ancient vendettas, and of a destiny that had been set into motion long before Eleanor and Count Alucard had ever crossed paths. As dawn approached, casting its first light over the horizon, Eleanor and Count Alucard knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they would face trials and tribulations unlike any they had encountered before. And as they stood side by side, ready to confront the challenges ahead, they knew that their love would be tested in ways they could scarcely imagine. In the days that followed Count Alucard's revelation to Eleanor, a palpable tension settled over the Sinclair plantation. Eleanor found herself caught in a delicate balance between her growing affection for Count Alucard and the unsettling knowledge of the dangers that surrounded him. Meanwhile, Jonathan Sinclair remained vigilant, his concern for his daughter's safety deepening with each passing day. One evening, as twilight descended over the plantation, Eleanor sought solace in the quiet sanctuary of the library. She sat by the crackling fireplace, her thoughts consumed by the weight of the secrets she now carried. The evening was unusually quiet, the air heavy with the scent of burning wood and the faint rustling of leaves outside the window. Lost in thought, Eleanor didn't notice her father's approach until he cleared his throat softly from the doorway. Startled, she looked up to find Jonathan standing there, his expression grave. "Eleanor," he began gently, taking a seat beside her. "We need to talk." Eleanor nodded silently, her heart sinking at the seriousness in her father's voice. She had anticipated this conversation ever since Count Alucard had revealed his true nature, but that didn't make it any easier to face. Jonathan took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers with a mixture of love and concern. "I've been watching you these past weeks," he admitted quietly. "I can see how much he means to you." Eleanor swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. "Father, please understand." Jonathan reached out, taking her hand in his. "I understand more than you know, Eleanor," he said softly. "But I cannot ignore the dangers that come with his presence here." Eleanor met her father's gaze, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I know," she whispered. "But he's not what everyone thinks. He wants to protect me." Jonathan's grip tightened around her hand, his worry etched deeply into his features. "And can you trust him, Eleanor? Can you truly trust him with your life?" Eleanor hesitated, torn between her father's fears and her own burgeoning feelings for Count Alucard. I believe him," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "With all my heart." Jonathan sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping with resignation. "Then I suppose there's nothing more I can say," he admitted. Except to ask that you be careful. Please, Eleanor, be careful." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks as she nodded silently, overwhelmed by the depth of her father's love and understanding. She knew that Jonathan's concerns were rooted in a desire to protect her. But she couldn't ignore the bond she shared with Count Alucard, the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. Later that night, Eleanor slipped out of the plantation house and made her way towards the guest cottage where Count Alucard resided. Moonlight bathed the garden in an ethereal glow, casting long shadows across the path. When she reached the cottage, she found the door ajar once more, a single candle burning inside. Heart pounding in her chest, Eleanor pushed the door open and stepped inside. Count Alucard was waiting for her by the window, his expression grave yet strangely serene. "Eleanor," he greeted her softly, his voice a whisper in the quiet room. She crossed the room to stand before him, her eyes searching his face. "Count Alucard," she began, her voice wavering with emotion. What happens now?" He studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that sent a thrill through her veins. "Now," he said finally, his voice low and measured, "we prepare." Eleanor's brow furrowed in confusion. "Prepare? For what?" Count Alucard turned to face her fully, his features etched with determination. "For what is to come," he replied cryptically. "There are forces at work here, Eleanor. Forces that seek to exploit what I am, what we are." Eleanor's heart raced as she realized the gravity of his words. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Count Alucard's jaw clenched with suppressed emotion. "Power," he said simply. "Power beyond measure. They believe that by controlling a Dhampir, they can control the very forces of life and death." Eleanor shivered at the implications of his words. And what will we do?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Count Alucard reached out, gently brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We will face them," he said firmly. "Together." As Eleanor looked into his eyes, she saw the steel resolve within him, the same resolve that had drawn her to him from the beginning. In that moment, she knew that their bond was not just a fleeting connection, but a partnership forged in the crucible of adversity. And as the night deepened around them, Eleanor and Count Alucard stood united against the shadows that threatened to engulf them. Their hearts intertwined in a dance of courage, love, and unyielding determination.